One of the biggest threats to the future of our forests is the introduction of new insects and diseases brought on by changing climate and globalization, and the disruption to existing ecosystems they bring. To discuss this, I'm joined by the USDA Forest Services Andrew Liebhold. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good, it's an honor.
So before we start talking about the threats, what value do insects and disease have within a forest?
Well, for many years, in fact, back when I was younger, people used to think that all insects were bad. But over time, we've sort of learned that actually a lot of forest insects actually are beneficial. Even those that kill trees, we've learned that the disturbances that native insects create in many cases are part of natural ecosystems, and sort of the birth and death of forests is part of the natural cycles of forest dynamics. And so those kind of natural disturbances of forest insects are actually quite beneficial in terms of things like nutrient cycling in forests and other aspects of forest dynamics.
How come we're seeing so many non-native species in forests?
Well, it all goes back to globalization. With globalization, there's increasing international trade and travel. There are a lot of beneficial things about globalization in terms of economic value, but there, unfortunately, are some accidental things that happen, which is a lot of insects and diseases are accidentally transported in cargo, and a lot of people, us passengers, sometimes we accidentally, unknowingly transport insects with food and plants that we move around the world.
And what kind of impact has that had?
What we've learned is really the majority of non-native insects are actually benign. You wouldn't even notice that they're there. But unfortunately, there's a few of these species of non-native insects. They can cause tremendous damage. A lot of it goes back to sort of the fact that most of these non-native species, when they arrive in a new part of the world, trees may not have resistance to them. They may not have any natural enemies, any predators and parasites, and their populations sometimes just explode. And when they do that, occasionally they can cause massive amounts of tree mortality. So, for example, in North America, where I'm from, we had the chestnut blight fungus that was accidentally introduced back over 100 years ago, and it completely eliminated American chestnut. It's no longer a species that you even see in forests. And more recently, about 30 years ago, we had an invasion of what's called the emerald ash borer. And that species, as it spreads through North America, it's completely eliminating the majority of trees that are ashes in the genus Fraxinus. So these can have huge impacts.
How do we increase resilience?
Well, it's a really difficult question. I mean, part of the problem in making forests resilient is with climate change. It's very difficult to reverse climate change. And we know that climate change is causing changes in the disturbance regimes that a lot of insects and diseases cause. But with non-native insects, with invasions, our best approach to managing that problem is through what we call biosecurity. And that's where typically done by government agencies, where they regulate trade and imports to make it safer so insects and diseases aren't moved with trade, and also so that passengers and airplanes don't move insects. So that's probably our best approach.
You talked about some big issues there, globalization, climate change. So what needs to be done now, do you think, to improve the situation? What needs to be done in terms of resilience that we've talked about?
Well, I'm a scientist, so it's easy for me to say what we need is more research, but I do think that science can contribute to finding solutions to these problems. We really don't really understand even a lot of the natural disturbance regimes that insects cause. We also don't understand very well how insects and diseases are responding to climate change, and we don't really understand the factors that promote biological invasions and how they best can be managed. So to be honest, I think that to make wiser decisions about how to make forests more resilient to these disturbances, we really need more research.
Well, thank you ever so much indeed for joining us today. Fascinating discussion, so thank you.
Thank you.